Hey everyone, welcome. I hope you're doing well. I wanted to do a little tutorial since it's been a while since I've done one. Sorry about that. Uh, we are gonna get started with the sketch. So for this one, because it's mostly gonna be an open plain area, I want to establish my horizon line first. For this one, because I was changing the way we have this perspective laying out instead of being in the ground, how I'd usually do the trees, doing kind of more of an above scene. So having this horizon line helps me establish the perspective so I can get everything laid out right, or at least mostly right. So as you're going to see here, I'm just going to be sketching in some different ideas, different shapes of how I want these plains and these mountains to look. And I'm going to be keeping in mind how I want everything to flow together. So as you saw with the final result, a lot of it's going to be in this more kind of semicircle pattern, spiraling inward rather. So more is going to be more on the right hand side than the left, but we're gonna have fun. So I'm just going to be messing around, trying to get these shapes in. I tend to bounce around when sketching. I don't do foreground, background, background to foreground, anything like that. Just however my brain is thinking in that moment, I'll start sketching in that area. So yeah, you'll just see me bouncing around. Now when it comes to painting, that's different. I work background to foreground. So that way it helps me maintain saturation, color control, keeping everything nice and uniform. And I'm not going too dark too quickly. Helps keep that control. And I do, at least lately, I've been spending a lot more time sketching out these just because I want to kind of nail it down without having to restart later. Because sometimes I'll get an idea about halfway through and I'm like, oh, well, we might as well just stick with what we got. So I've just been at least slowing down in this process to kind of flesh out that idea and get um, the idea at least somewhat finalized. Hopefully that makes sense. So as we move into the coloring, I lower the opacity of the sketch. And like I said earlier, I work for background to foreground. So starting with the sky, and I want it to be more of a sunny day. I've been more into doing sunny themes at usually around noon because I like playing around with those nice bright warm hues. So it's always fun. And I was toggling with the idea of putting clouds in, but for this one I decided against it because I felt it would be too much. But could have tried, but I just felt like putting in a little bit of atmosphere of the far back of the sky and calling it a day. And then moving on to the mountains. And these far mountains, I kept them as a silhouette to kind of help with the sense of depth. So as an object is more away from you, it has less detail. So just keeping it a silhouette really helps it push back. Not to mention adding a bit of atmosphere as the same as the sky makes it take more on that. Oh, not me, it takes more. It helps more with that sense of depth. And the lasso tool here really helps in, because I can just go in, select it, fill, and move on to the next one. So for right now, we're not going to worry about painting in the water. I like to have everything established first for reflections and the color bouncing around first before fully painting in water. But I do add, hi Squeedle, a little bit of a placeholder. So I'm just going to fill it in with a blue and then move on to the next set of mountains. So as we work on this next bad mountain, it's going to be more of a blue-green. And I do switch the color back and forth a bit here, just trying to see what kind of green I wanted to get. If I wanted to go more blue or more of a vibrant green. But nothing too crazy. Same simple shading on this one, because it is still further away from us. We don't want to put too much detail, trying to keep it more established, more in that background. So here we're going to add a little bit more detail, but nothing too crazy. Keeping more in the bluish tone to kind of keep it more back there. Establishing that sense of depth. So just using the lasso tool, filling it in. And I wanted to do, I was debating whether these rocks were going to be more gray or more brown. And ultimately, I decided just to do more of a kind of blue gray with a little bit of green in them. I thought it would be nice, since the sand itself is going to have more of a brownish tone, so they would have a nice contrast to the sand, so they kind of help stick out instead of blending into each other. And just doing simple shading, so using some lights to show highlight and blending it in for shadow, and then doing the same thing with the grass on top. So to add just a little bit of detail, I want to add at least some indication of grass. Instead of using the usual grass brush I normally use, just my typical kind of round brush, just going in, adding little spikes of green to indicate that there is some greenery there without going too crazy. And I did this just because I felt like it, honestly. I thought it would be nice to break it up and to show that there's just a little bit of green everywhere. I like having a bit of overgrown green. I was debating doing this or kind of indicating trees, but I wanted to keep the landscape kind of simple and not overcomplicate it, because I do tend to like putting in a whole bunch of trees everywhere, but trying to focus it basically. So simply repeating the process for this next guy, except he's going to be a bit more saturated and slightly darker than the last one. And this is when I was really debating if I wanted to keep the same um, gray tone or if I wanted to switch to the brown and slowly bring that brown in, and ultimately deciding just going and keeping the gray tone. I thought it looked nicer, and as I said earlier, it contrasts with the sand color that we're going to put in. That's going to be more of that brown tone, and help make it stand out. And when it came to shading, I kept trying to overcomplicate it and put too much detail into it instead of just keeping it simple, because it is far away. So I didn't need to put as much detail as I initially was trying to do. And as soon as it clicked in my brain that I don't need to overcomplicate it, it worked out fine. But basically, I just like to put in, when I fill a color, it's basically the mid-tone. And then I put a dark color and a light color and just slowly blend the three together. Occasionally I'll add in the sky color if I'm trying to make like a round object like a tree on the shadow side to help sell the roundness and outplace it in the scene. But for rocks, it's basically three colors: the midtone, the shadow, and the light. So for the rocks in the water, I kept them pretty simple to kind of match with the same plane that they're going to be on with that middle back mountain. So they kind of fit together, and adding a bit of the grass indication as I was doing with the others. Nothing too crazy. Same old, same old. So to kind of help myself out, I put the sand layer below these two, so that way I know it will be fully filled in when I go to select, and I don't have to worry about there being any gaps or anything. But same as usual, filling in with the lasso tool. And I was having, I wouldn't say issue, or it's just problem solving here of the color of the sand, of how vibrant I wanted it to be. Initially, I had it more on, the orange side, and then slowly more towards a peach color, a light peach color, and I think it worked out pretty well. Because I felt if the sand was too vibrant, it doesn't match this time of day. As you can see by the sky, it's not as, it doesn't match what I was going for with the sky and everything. So to kind of tone it down a bit. And then playing in the shadows using more of a darker orange and a lighter color of closer to white but not white, to kind of add some indication of the sand mountains, I guess you would call it, as it shifts and everything. So now we're gonna work on the water. And with the water, I start with a soft brush. And same as I do with anything, I just put in the colors and start blocking in. And then I'll start blending them together. And with water, usually the darker the color, it indicates a sense of depth of the water, rather than the shadow, at least for the base of the water. So in the more deeper parts of the water, you're going to want to add a darker color to kind of indicate that. But you also have to keep in mind depth in the scene. So if it's farther away from us, it won't be as prominent, if that makes sense. So it's going to be more flattened out rather than easy to see, as if it were closer to us. But for this purpose is just blocking in the color of the water, so using more blues and greens as it is reflected in the world around it right now. So from the sky and from the greenery. And then just smoothing it out. Create a nice blend. I usually use my the brush I use for grass texture, and I realized I didn't like it the way the water looked anymore. So I started using a soft brush, and I like the way they blend. So I started keeping it. So this is more of a stylistic choice of how I add a bit of, well, shine to the water. I like using this brush and just making straight lines. Typically a brown, because I switched the layer mode to color dodge to kind of make it more shiny. And then taking the soft eraser and erasing a bit of the top and bottom. But this is purely stylistic of how I do water. But I like it. So this is a bit of a cheat that I do for reflection. I just duplicate and merge these layers. Then I'm going to bring them, flip them, and just lower the opacity of them. Quick and easy. How I do reflections. So now we're going to add a bit of a water break. So wherever the water and an object meet, it's just going to be like a white line. And this is going to help us establish the movement of the water. And right up here with the sand, we are going to do a bit of like the foam. I'm going to add a bit of the water texture, like the waves I would see under when you're underneath the water, adding that in. And then going back to the sand layer and adding a little indication of it being wet as when the water moves in and out for that. And blurry, no, not blurry. I don't know. We're just trying to indicate this water movement, adding a bit of detail. It's the little stuff, the old hassle dazzle. Oh, yeah, I'm adding a bit of the sand color underneath the water and lowering the opacity there to kind of help with the illusion of water moving, to kind of show it's underneath the water. Hopefully it works. I think it does. Alright, and now we're going to do the front area. And this is going to have the most detail to kind of bring it all forward and help sell that sense of depth in the scene. So we're going to be using a lot of the grass and plant brushes, add a bit of flowers, and have fun with a little bit more detail. That's pretty much it. Just coming in, adding a bit of shading, same as always, light, dark, blend together. Keeping more of the light on the light side to match the rest of the scene. So for the bath, I was debating between using the rock color of the blue gray or using the sand color. And I thought it would be nice to have the blue gray at first, but ultimately changing it to the sand color to show it leading down to the beach. To make it more cohesive, the biggest problem I ran into was making sure this path didn't blend into that small patch of sand I have just below, making it two separate things. But using the layer modes later on, the multiply and the light layers helps really push the two segments so they don't blend into each other more. But I'll go into that when we get there. So when I'm adding these plants, I'm going to try to do a lot of the small scale brushes towards the edge and try to make them bigger as we get closer to trying to sell this little bit of depth to kind of give a sense of scale. Excuse me. And then mix in a bunch of different plants and just have fun building it up, making it look like full of plant life. And then add some flowers. And I'm going to add some flowers in the back as little dots to kind of give an indication that this is full of different flowers. So we're gonna do a bunch of adding shadows and lights everywhere. And I like using a soft brush when adding them in because it helps control the shadow. I can make it small and make it a hard shadow, or I can make it big and make it a soft shadow depending on how I want the shadow to be. Typically, if it's a closer object, like a cast shadow, I would typically do more of a hard shadow. If it's more general, or I just want to darken something, it'll typically be a softer shadow. And same with the light, same premise. So I'm just going to come in and add a whole bunch of shadows in right here to add a bit of final touches to really sell the scene and give a stronger sense of light, and help push this foreground a bit closer to us because it's kind of matching a bit of the background. And one last thing we will do is add a bit of atmosphere. So same, taking a soft brush and coming in with this blue and adding almost like a bit of fog to really push the side back and kind of sell a bit of the water. Sorry, Squeeto's being cute. And so we're just going to put a bit of everywhere. Far back, middle ground, everywhere except the most foreground. And that's how I made this beach scene. So I hope this was somewhat helpful. I know it wasn't too detailed, but there wasn't too many elements to think about for this one. Just basically rocks, sand, and grass. But I am planning on doing more tutorial type stuff. I know I have a blender that I gotta finish doing that I started last year and get the painting version of the village done. But hopefully we can get that one done soon. But we'll see. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful, and thank you guys for watching.